series. And so it's New Rules for Love, rediscovering God's design for relationships. And so last week we launched and we started this series with talking about the myth of the perfect match. The myth of the perfect match, it says this, that when I meet the right person, when I find the right person, when I connect with the right person, when the right person stands at the altar with me and says, I do, or if I move in with the right person, then everything will be good. My relationship will be good. The problems that I've got currently now, they will be non-existent because the right person will make it all better and make it all perfect. And then, so all of a sudden, I might have these problems that I've got in my life. I've got to struggle maybe with pornography, or I've got to struggle with self-esteem issues. I've got to struggle with, I'm not very good at intimacy or communication. But when I meet the right person, everything will be good. Everything will work out because they're the person that's created for me. They're meant to be with me, and everything will just magically work. And it's like the Hollywood ending gives it the idea of when you meet the right person, what happens? It is happily ever after. And what we looked at last week is when we buy into this myth, and the single people in particular went a whole lot deeper with this on Thursday. The myth with this is that when this happens, if we buy into this, we set ourselves up for failure because the right person doesn't exist. But rather what we were trying to look at is we're not meant to try and find the right person. We're meant to become the right person for that other person that we are looking for. And so that was last week. This week we're continuing on with the series, and we're talking about the power of clarity, which is this: saying what you mean and meaning what you say. When I was putting this series together, because just so you know, my sermons challenge me. Not all of them, but plenty of them challenge me. And I was most confronted, as far as I felt God talking to me the most about this one. And he was saying, you really struggle with this. You are not clear. You think you're clear, but you're not clear. And then I find it fascinating. Like, I'm about to do this, and 3 days ago, I have this conversation with Sage, and just this glazed look over, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not at all clear. I am, just like you are, a work in progress when it comes to clear communication. But this is kind of important. Single people, you need to realize this specifically, because the opposite of clear communication is absolute chaos. And that is generally why most relationships end up failing. And they end up failing because they don't have expectations met. Like, there's unsaid, unmet, unreached, unrealized expectations that someone put on someone, and they weren't clear about it. And because they weren't clear about it, then people get upset and they fall apart and they get angry, and there's tension turns up. And the tension turns up, and it always turns up because someone wasn't clear somewhere. Back to like what I opened with and talked about at the start, like, you said this, they heard this. And you think that you are clear, but can I encourage you with this? Just because you think you're clear doesn't mean you're clear in your communication. In fact, if you think you're clear and all they hear is scrambled like, you're not clear. You're not clear. If they're saying you're not clear, you're not clear. Husbands, if your wife says that you're not clear in your communication, you're not clear. The same is flip-sided. If she's saying, or if he's saying, you're not clear, you're not clear. You're not doing a good job of communicating with your other person. If you got friends that are always confused at you, it should be a red light flashing that you have a problem with how you articulate and you communicate. Most of us communicate really, really poorly. I am the chief culprit of this, okay? I don't know, are you with me with that? I'm the chief culprit of poor communication. Yes, Master. We are not a cult. We are not a cult. So that's how do I come back from that? That's the big idea. Saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Can I be so clear? We are not a cult. So clear. No yes masters. No yes masters. Saying what you mean and meaning what you say. The Apostle Paul, he shares it like this to the church in Corinth in his letters. He says it like this. He says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. When I was a child, this is how I acted. I talked like a child. I behaved like a child. I acted like a child. I thought like a child. I made decisions like a child. I interpreted what they were saying like a child, and it's confusing. The parents will realize this, it's confusing. And a whole lot of relationships end up functioning exactly like this. We're adults, but we behave and we communicate exactly like children. When I was a child, this is how I communicated. And so, as one parent of little people, for you that don't have little people, that one day perhaps will have little people, let me give you an idea of what this chaotic confusion looks like. And I get that some of you have got, you've got nieces and nephews, or you've got friends with kids, and so you think you know. You think you know how kids think. But can I tell you, you don't know. You don't know until you have these little angels of your own. And when you have these little angels of your own, you discover this whole other world of confusion that turns up. Let me give you an example. You'll discover, so single people or those of you without kids, you'll discover this. When you have kids, all of them at some point in time will have their favorite outfit. Yeah. Yeah, the parents are starting to chuckle already. So there's a favorite outfit, and sometimes it's not necessarily an outfit, it's a favorite toy or something like that. But let's keep with the outfit. They've got a favorite outfit, and at some point they're always wanting to wear it, and it gets smelly. But that's beside the point, because you can deal with the smell because you don't want the headache of what happens. But at some point they trip over and they fall over in the mud, or if you're on a farm, they fall over in cow poo. And so that you have to wash it. And tantrum number 1 turns up there because they tripped over and now it's dirty. Tantrum number 1. And there's no necessary age bracket of when this stops. Because to be honest, I think I still do this. Okay? So tantrum number 1 emerges, that they've tripped over and it's dirty, and they're upset, like, I want to wear my favorite jumper, socks, whatever it is, but it's dirty, it doesn't look good, I'm not happy with it, it's covered in cow poo, it's covered in mud, I don't know what it is. And so you're like, well, wash it. And then they're upset because now you're taking it off them, but they don't want to have it on them, but they're upset because it's coming off them, but you manage to pry it off them, and then you convince them with this narrative. This is what we'll do. This is what we'll do, little person. You and I will both take it and we'll join forces and we'll put it together in the washing machine. Isn't this fun? This is so much fun. And we put it in the washing machine together. Hey, how about you get a scoop of the laundry powder out of here and you put it in there? Isn't that fun? And then you press the buttons and you start it. And they think this is great. They think this is great. Like, we are doing the washing together. They love it. It's incredible. So much fun. And then it finishes, and like, how about you grab it out and you put it in the dryer, or we'll go and peg it up in the clothes. We'll just have to wait a little bit longer. It's a hot day. It'll dry quick. We'll get through this. It's going to be fine. And then eventually the time comes, and you're relieved because there's been pestering for the last 3 hours of this process. And then you take it off, and then you put it on them. And you know what the next meltdown is? It smells different. It doesn't smell like it used to smell. I don't want to wear it anymore because now it smells like the fabric softener. And so the meltdown continues as far as like, I want my favorite thing. It's muddy. I don't want to wear it. I want it washed. Now it's washed. And now I don't want to wear it because it smells different. It doesn't smell how it did. It used to smell like this and now it doesn't. Single people, you need to know this. That is a meltdown you can never solve because you can't make it smell like it did before without weeks and weeks and weeks of use. So there's weeks and weeks of pain, but that doesn't finish. It doesn't finish there. One morning you'll get up and this is what will happen. Dad, can I have cornflakes for breakfast? That's a great idea. Here's your bowl of cornflakes with milk. I didn't realize you'd wanted dry cornflakes without milk. It's ongoing. And that's how children act. That's how children behave. But you know what? It's not too indifferent to how we do communication as couples. Communication amongst co-workers, communications with friends. We speak and act and reason and interpret like children. I want this. I want, and he's confused, and she thinks she's clear, but he's confused, or it's vice versa the other way, and no one really knows what one another wants because there's no clarity in the communication. And what we're doing is we're like a kid that is chucking a tantrum over the clean outfit that we don't want to wear now because it smells different. I know it's silly. But for a lot of the people that end up in my office when it comes to relationship advice or help. The communication dilemma is generally always that. It hasn't been clear from the get-go. And because it hasn't been clear, it's ended up as something monstrous over this side, but if it had have started with clarity here, it would never have got there. I'm pulling these statistics out of my brain, which is very dangerous. And I'm making it up on the fly, if I'm honest. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but I'd say the vast majority of divorces would not happen if there was clear communication. If there was clear communication from the get-go, I'd nearly think nearly all divorces would be avoided. But we don't. Why don't we? Because there's something odd about sharing my thoughts with the person that I said I do with or I've chosen to live with. There's something odd that we don't do it. We think we do it, but then we hold tidbits of information. For what reason? I don't know. But there's something odd that happens when we get married. The single people, you date and you'll be really good at talking and communicating. And then when you get married, it's like a light bulb switches and you need to keep things from them. I don't know why it happens, but it happens. It plays out that we don't share quite the same. Things start changing, and it has to be a deliberate effort that we enter into to communicate. And that's why Paul says this. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned like a child. When we started our relationship, so often it starts like this or it gets to this point, but it shouldn't be. That's not how it should function. There should be clear communication. We should be doing this. We say what we mean, and we mean what we say. But the reality is this, so often our relationships look like this. We don't say, or you don't say what you mean, and you don't mean what you say. You kind of say kind of what you feel, but you leave plenty of it out. So they think they're in the safe books, but in retrospect, they end up in like hot lava. Because you're not clear, you're not concise with them. She's not clear with you. Guys know what this is like. This happens every birthday and every Christmas. She was dropping hints all year. But we're pretty hard-headed, and unless the hint is like a sledgehammer, we don't get it. And often, even if it was a sledgehammer, we still wouldn't get it at all. Or is that just me, guys? Everyone's too scared to speak. Okay. Yeah. We don't say what we mean, and we don't mean what we say. Rather, oftentimes, this is what it looks like that we do. We sugarcoat issues. We sugarcoat them like, it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem. It's okay. Like it'll be fine. You might have even seen that video that's been. Are they called memes? These videos. Okay, it's a meme going around, and one of them it looks like this, where the wife rings the husband, and she says to him, "So you know how when I was pregnant, that you rang your family and you told all your friends and everything that we were pregnant?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I just want to let you know that we crashed the car this morning." We find ways to sugarcoat issues. I didn't do it. We didn't. I didn't make the bad financial decision. We made the bad financial decision. I didn't or it's no, or we find ways of padding it out so that will be okay. They'll be able to receive that. They'll be happy with that. And we find ways of padding it out or sugarcoating it to make it seem like, yes, there's a little bit of worries over here, but it'll be okay. I'll sugarcoat it, and then I'll present it in this nice little box like this. And so they will be happy with what this is and that. And so we sugarcoat issues or we hide our thoughts and opinions or our feelings with sarcasm and humor. We do that because I don't really want to share completely, or I'm a bit uncomfortable, and so I'm gonna hide behind this facade of I'll make a joke about it or make a sarcastic comment, or we'll use this word, I don't care. Like she brings up or he brings up, or like it comes up like, here's this thought. What's your opinion on this? What do you want to do here? I don't care. I don't care at all. Like I don't care what kind of paint we use. I don't care what color it is. I don't care what furniture we have. I don't care where we live. I don't care how often your in-laws come. My in-laws come. Your parents come. I don't like we use those I don't cares. When reality is you do care. In fact, I'd say with most things, all of us have an opinion. Humans are opinionated things. When it comes to relationships, we are opinionated people. And you've got two opinionated people, and then when one says, I don't care, and sometimes I get it, like sometimes, what do you want for dinner? I don't care. And sometimes that really does mean, I don't care. But then other times, I don't care, like is a flashing red light, you're in danger zone, because you know behind there that there is the big, I really do care, I just can't be bothered going with the dialogue and the interaction and the debate that comes with it. Or we make vague promises. Yep, I will cook dinner XYZ times a week, every week. Or I'll make sure I take leave at a certain time of the year so we can go away with these people or with the in-laws. Or we make all these vague promises that I will do this, I will do that. And so we do this. And when we do this, what we're not doing is we're not saying what we mean, and we're not meaning what we say when we do all of these things. And the outworking of this, it looks like this. When we sugarcoat issues, it equals hurt. When we, with our spouse, with our friend, with our partner, with whoever it is, when we sugarcoat the issue, it will equal hurt at some point, because somewhere is a trap hidden for them that you haven't purposely hidden. It's just that perhaps you're trying to get buy-in, and so you leave this part out and sugarcoat it enough so that, yep, they'll absorb that, they'll be happy with that, so we'll sugarcoat it. But in the end, it leads to hurt. Or there's sarcasm and humor. It ends with confusion, like I'm not really sure what they want, what they think. I don't really know what it is that they're meaning. I'm confused because it's always a joke, it's always funny, but it's not, because at some point down the track it comes back and it wasn't at all. Or it's like, I don't care equals insecurity. How does it equal insecurity? Because after a while, that person realizes this, that they do care. That they really actually care about a whole host of these decisions, but they say, I don't care. And then after a bit, they say, I don't care. And so you go ahead and do that, and you keep doing this. And then after a while, this is what happens. You get insecure about making decisions because you know that there's going to be an argument after the fact because they really did care. They just couldn't be bothered telling you they did. They couldn't be bothered telling you they did. Or vague promises equals distrust. I don't trust him, I don't trust her. They always make these promises that I'll outwork this, that make these promises of I'll do this, make these promises, but they never follow through. That's perhaps one of the things that we're all horrid at in our relationships, making vague promises. If we make vague promises, you're on a thin layer of ice if that's your habit. Why are you on a thin layer of ice? Because at some point that ice will snap and he or she will start losing trust for what it is that you say. We don't say what we mean, and we don't mean what we say, and it ends us in hot water, making them feel hurt, making them confused, making them insecure, causing them to distrust us. And so Paul says it like this: when I was a child, I spoke like a child and reasoned like a child. What did that look like? I didn't say what I mean, and I didn't mean what I say. Everyone was confused, including myself, because that's how children generally communicate. And that's how we often do in our relationships. We communicate like a child. But he says, when I grew up, I did this. I put away childish things. When I grew up. Everyone say grew up. Grew up. If you are in a relationship of any kind, say, I need to grow up. Ooh. Say that with a bit more gusto. I need to grow up. I need to grow up. Fantastic, Hannah. This is like, I don't know, I'm clawing at something, but I think we're heading somewhere. Like, in our relationships, in our friendships, in our families, in our marriages, we need to grow up and communicate with clarity. Say what I mean and mean what it is that I say. Not vague promises, not this, not that. Like, what I say is what I mean, and what I mean is what I say. So Paul's writing to the church in Corinth. And so if Paul, prior to this, he's been Saul of Tarsus, and he's had this conversion on the Damascus Road. He's had this encounter with Jesus, and then he became, like, God ends up renaming him as Saul. And so Paul, and he's writing to the church in Corinth, and he's wanting to encourage them in all this. And so he says, when I was a child, this is how you thought. But then you grew up. And then he gets a little bit further down in verse 13. And he gets to this point in verse 13 where it's a really well-known verse that plenty of you that are married, this would have been perhaps the verse that was at your wedding, or at least you've been to a wedding where this verse has been used. And it's this: 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these things, he says, is love. When I was a child, I thought, I spoke, I reasoned like a child. But when I grew up, I put childish things away. And then he gets to this point where he says, but you know what? All these things will last forever. Faith, hope, and love. And love is the greatest of these things. And what he's trying to highlight is this: clear communication starts from the premise of love. Clear communication starts from the premise of I want them to feel loved, to know that they are loved, that to know that they are with me, to know that I have my thoughts and my heart is turned towards them, to realize that as far as like love, it says this, that I want to draw you close. So in my clear communication, I'm going to do my all for you to realize how I feel about you, think about said situation, and I want to draw us close. Love realistically is this: it's transparent. And loving transparency is being honest and vulnerable about what we really want within the context of making sure that we are being loving towards the other person. And this is exceedingly important, because we can take this idea of clear communication is saying what you mean and meaning what you say, as it becomes all about me. What I want to get off my chest, what I want to say, what I want to talk about. But it shouldn't be solely about me. It should be about we. What we need to talk about, because we need to come together, because we need to join together, because we need to come together, to be connected together. There should be this transparency that brings knowing, vulnerability, that I know that they know my heart. That they know intimately my heart. The power of clarity is saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And when we truly say that, we open ourselves up for a transparency that allows them to be fully known and allows me to be fully known by them. The goal of marriage, the goal of relationships, the goal of healthy relationships is to be fully known, fully transparent with someone. In Genesis, there's this verse when it gets to Genesis 4, verse 4, it says this: now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. Now Adam knew Eve. And so this is what we believe as Christians, that Adam and Eve were the first people. And so this is talking about God creating the world. Most of you be aware of this. Like Genesis is the first book of the Bible, and it's talking about specifically the chapters 1, 2, and 3, and then like kind of talking about 4 as well. It is the talking about the beginnings of the world, how God created the world. And I find this really, really fascinating, specifically with this. And so if you didn't know, Genesis means this: it means beginning. And so there is a genesis of your relationship. There is a beginning stage of your relationship. Your relationship started somewhere. There was a genesis of it at some point, at some time, at somewhere. And for Adam and Eve, there was a genesis of their relationship that started before this place here in Genesis 4, verses 4, where it says that he knew his wife Eve, and they conceived. And this word knew, it comes from the Hebrew word yada. And you can get a bit of a glimpse of what it means. And different translations term it in different ways. Like some translations you use the word as far as they had sexual intercourse, or they made love. Like there's multiple different ways of how it's translated. But I think how the King James Version does it here with know, I think that's encompasses everything that was going on here. Because see, there was a Genesis part of their relationship that happened in Genesis chapter 1 when God created them. In Genesis chapter 1, God created the heavens and the earth. He created animals. He created everything. And he created mankind. He created Adam and Eve. And he gave them this command. It was to be fruitful and multiply. If you haven't worked it out, that doesn't happen by playing rock, paper, scissors or thumb wars or anything like that. That only happens one way. They do things. Won't go any further into that. But that was the genesis of their relationship when God created them and put them together. That was the genesis of their relationship. But something happens between Genesis 1, 2, 3, and then here in chapters 4, because this is the first time this word is used, that they knew each other. You see, this is what I would suggest, that they had been sexually intimate multiple times, but this is the first time they actively knew each other. There's something that happens between Genesis 1 and then Genesis 4. In between all these chapters, you got Genesis 3, where the snake turns up, the serpent turns up, the devil turns up. And he convinces Eve to eat this fruit that God said don't eat. He convinces her that if you eat it, all will be well. And she convinces her husband to eat it. And what happens is, realistically, part of it, like there's a story that talks about multiple things. But in the depth of it, I think when you look at Genesis 1, 2, 3, and 4, there's, as far as when it comes to marriage, there's this story of this unraveling transparency. They weren't transparent with one another. And when you're not transparent, what happens? It makes way for something to claw its way into your relationship and insert death, destruction, decay, and to separate things. And that's what happens. And so the serpent turns up and he convinces her to eat this. He bails on all form of responsibility. There's no communication about what anyone actively thinks or perceives regarding this, and they just go ahead and eat. But then we get to this part and it says that they knew one another. And I think this is so fundamental when it comes to clear communication, because husbands, wives, single people, you can have sex as much as you want, but it doesn't mean you know them, and it doesn't mean they know you. You can live together, but it doesn't mean that anyone knows each other. You can sit down and have dinner together, night in, night out, but it doesn't mean that anyone knows anyone. You can spend 15 years married and never know them, and them never know you. So many relationships exist like that. So many relationships exist where they're just two people doing life together. I think in my pre-marriage, I term there's 3 types of relationships. There's back-to-back, shoulder-to-shoulder, face-to-face. Back-to-back, they're enemies. They don't talk about anything. Communication's not even on the cards. Shoulder-to-shoulder, it kind of looks good. They do well together. They're healthy together. They go out to things and everything looks good and they've probably got a healthy relationship. They sit down at the dinner table and they do things together as a family and all of that. But they're just two people doing life together. And the difference between them and the face-to-face is that the face-to-face is I'm going to make a deliberate effort, not just to live with you, not just to make love with you, not just to connect with you. I'm going to make an effort for you to be fully known. Or for me, or for you to fully know me, because you can't affect them. But it is a deliberate effort of you are going to fully know me, because I am going to fully give myself to you through clear communication. How am I going to do that? I'm going to make a choice. I'm going to make a deliberate effort of I'm going to say what it is that I mean. And I'm going to mean what I say. There's not going to be any Morse code. You're not going to struggle to work this out. I'm going to be clear and concise with you. I'm going to share my heart with you. I'm going to share my thoughts with you. I'm going to share my feelings with you. Some of it's not going to be fun. Some of it's going to be a bit confronting. Some of it's going to be perhaps a bit challenging, because I really don't like when you paint the wall that color, when you move the furniture like that. There's small issues. But generally, it's the small issues that trip us up. And if we can't communicate in the small things, you never communicate with the big things.